started to talk about parent insights, college communications, and decision dynamics. First, let me just introduce myself. My name is Laura Rudolph. I've been in higher education, marketing, and enrollment for more than 15 years, and I have a pretty diverse experience across education. I've been in institutions of all sizes, 40,000 students to 1,000 students, 3 different states. I've been in multiple offices across campus, admissions, athletics, international affairs, doctoral health colleges, and I've been at the undergraduate and the graduate levels. So I've had a pretty wide range of experience. As far as Slate goes, I've been a captain since 2017. I helped my last institution with our implementation. And then I've also been a Capture client since 2017 as well. So I've had plenty of years to get to work with a great team at Capture. And lastly, I'm a millennial parent, and that relevance is to come. Currently, I am working as a CEO of Square One Consulting. So I've taken my talents on the road, as they say, and I'm now consulting for higher education and nonprofits across the country to help with all of their marketing and communication strategies. So before I kind of get into it today, I'm a big data person, and hopefully you are as well. And pretty much anywhere you turn today, it really doesn't matter what report that you read. It's very obvious that parents are a critical component of the college search. In fact, 3 out of 4 parents say that they're very involved in the college process, but only about half of them say they received communication from colleges. And that's straight from data from Reffel and Levitt. Data from Mongoose even suggests that they're the most important influencers of prospective students. And that is even compared to guidance counselors, current students, and they have the greatest impact at the beginning and early stages of the college search as well. And if you continue to look across all of this great data, the white papers and reports that are put out on a regular basis, you're going to see the same information. It is inevitable, ultimately, that parents are a huge driving factor in the college search process. So as marketers and communication professionals and enrollment professionals, there's probably a couple of questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first question is, who are they? Who are these students today that we are interacting with, and who are their parents? And how do they want to be communicated with? What content resonates with them? And then how do we apply all this information we've learned in a very practical way? And I'm going to cover each of these with you today throughout my presentation. So let's kind of start from the beginning about who today's parents are. So for the most part, if we are looking at our general group of parents in our institutions right now and in probably the late stages of high school, you're going to see that most of them are Gen X parents. And Gen X parents are, frankly, one of my favorite group of parents that I've had the opportunity to work with, because they like for you to give it to them straight. So for the Gen X parent, for the most part, they make up a majority of that generational parent. And for the most part, you're going to see that they are older. They're waiting until later in life to have children. And on average, we're looking at about age 27 is when a majority of this group decided to start having families. That's significantly later than baby boomers and the generations before them. They really strive for transparency. It's a bit of a non-negotiable subject, and they are wanting everything to be transparent because they're a bit cynical. They believe that people are often motivated by self-interest, and they're pretty distrustful of institutions. And when I was trying to think of a good visual for this, I couldn't help but pull out my good friend here from Kimmy Schmidt. I'm onto you and your gimmicks. That's what I assume a Gen Xer is kind of thinking behind the scenes. They're trying to think, what is hidden in the fine print? What are you not telling me? And how can I really get the honest truth about what I may be experiencing at your institution? Now, with all that being said, they are more likely to trust personal accountability rather than processes. So you might be familiar in the past with sending an email or communication talking about your Department of Public Safety. And for the most part, that's been acceptable up to this point. But now these parents are more interested in the details. Who is the exact contact for public safety? In fact, my student has just moved in. I would like to know if there's an officer assigned to my student's dorm. I want to know who that person is, and I would like their contact information, please. That's the kind of personal accountability that they're going to be looking for. So the more details, contact information, and the people who are going to be responsible when I need information. They are also pretty skeptical. Of course, this is going to really run into your value messaging and your affordability messaging. They are very sensitive to prices and the value that they are going to receive in return for the money that they are spending. But the best part, I think, about Gen X parents, other than being able to write really easily and transparently for them, is the fact that honesty can actually win them over. Now, that's a hard thing to swallow sometimes as a marketing person, because we really try to make sure that what we are putting out there, the data points, is very positive. But even if the honest answer isn't 100% positive, the Gen X parents are really going to appreciate that. Because let's be honest, not all of us have the best data points out there. It may be that you're struggling with your 4-year graduation rate or your 6-year graduation rate. Now, they are going to know that you do not have 100% one. So they're assuming that if they ask this question, maybe you're going to glaze over the answer. But frankly, just give it to them. Provide the accurate information. And even though it might not be the most positive data point that you have as an institution, you can talk through it. Have a conversation with them about it, and they're going to really appreciate that. Now, Gen X obviously is kind of what is dominating our universities and our campuses right now. But as a marketing communications person, you always have to be looking ahead. We have to be preparing for what's coming next, because we have other students that we're communicating with that are younger than our senior high school population. There's juniors, sophomores. Some people are even communicating with freshmen. So we need to be looking ahead, almost 4 years ahead, as to what's going to be coming down the pipeline. So I want to introduce our next generation of parents. And this is where it comes in very handy that I happen to be in this generation, which is the millennials. The perennials are coming, and that is coined by the New York Times. And so I want to kind of talk through what you can expect in the coming years with this next generation. I'll be honest, I think millennials get a bad rap. We know kind of the shtick that we've heard about millennials. They're lazy, they're entitled, they receive trophies for everything. That's what we used to read all the time about this generation when they were in high school and they were going into college. But if you kind of do a little bit more research, this generation has grown up. The oldest millennials in this population are upwards of 40, 42 years old now. And so they've had a lot of experience, and that's something that we need to recognize as marketing communications people, that they are not the same people they were as when they were entering college. So if you look online and you read, I found a great article by Brenda Bauer written on Psychology Today. And she addressed this millennial scorn, as I would consider it, acknowledging that these parents have really had a unique, historic, life-altering experience. This generation has gone through post 9/11 America. They've gone through a housing market crash, unemployment upon graduating college, and now as parents, they're having to deal with a global pandemic. These are things that they never could have expected, but it really has changed their worldview, and they've really grown up during this time. So I think it's time to update these stereotypes a little bit and just learn a little bit more about them. If we're looking ahead, by about 2027, the K through 12 population of parents will primarily be populated by the children of millennials. So as a content marketer, you need to understand millennial buying behaviors and start embracing how they consume and how they share information in order to start building these relationships with them. Slowly but surely, Gen Xers took over baby boomers, but this millennial generation is larger. And so we're going to start seeing this happening very quickly. So let's talk a little bit about them. We said Gen X up to that point was having fewer children and starting later in life. Millennials are even further away. Their average age for having family now is around the age of 30. And they're having fewer families because they are starting later in life. They are also the first to really experience the digital revolution. So as you can assume, the oldest millennials, which I kind of fall into that group myself, we may be able to remember a time before technology was part of our daily life. I remember the first computer that we received. I remember dial-up. I remember that process. But you know what? We are now mobile natives. And that has caused a short attention span. And you're going to continue to see that through the generations that follow us. And there's this convenience of access to information that we now have as a millennial generation that you're going to continue to see moving forward as well. When it comes to education, there are more college degrees, more college graduates in this population than any other previously, but that means that there is higher college debt than there ever has been before. So despite their reputation for laziness, they actually worked pretty hard, and they feel very strongly about wanting their work to be meaningful in ways that older generations typically didn't insist upon. Now, this may be a surprise to some of you who read, these horrible things about some of this generation when they were younger. But according to the U.S. Treasury, millennials tend to invest in organizations that prioritize the greater good more than any previous generation. Now, they may not be doing the typical traditional ways of charitable giving, but they're approaching giving and how to invest their time and their money more strategically with kind of an eye on social impact investing that is serving the greatest good. So they're very civic minded. They're driven by their communities, their local communities, even their global communities in certain situations. And according to the Pew Research Center, millennials are far more connected to their peers and tend to be more upbeat than older generations, even despite higher levels of unemployment and student loan debt. So I think it's really important to kind of think about that moving forward, because their children are also going to start feeling that same civic good, greater good mentality. Now, when it comes to brand loyalty, millennials do not stick with brands or institutions simply because they've used them. So your school is not going to be an exception to that. So you really need to be thinking about legacies. If legacies are a big portion of your marketing strategy, then you need to start thinking that they may not be an automatic win for you. You may need to work a little bit harder, because that's not going to necessarily be the case moving forward. So you're going to have to continually prove your school's value to parents. Now, the other thing is that they do have high expectations for your services. So their generation expects your school to supply high quality academics. They want their students to be very well-rounded. They want you to be providing good nutrition, organic lunches, gluten-free options. They are going to have high expectations for what they are paying, because they have understood what college debt looks like. Now, one of the most interesting pieces, I think, about the millennial generation, and I can say I feel very seen in sharing this with you, is word of mouth. So word of mouth has always been a huge piece of pretty much any school strategy. And in the surveys that I've done for all of the institutions that I've worked with in the past, we always see word of mouth as one of the number one, if not the top three ways that people have learned about an institution, is through word of mouth. So for years, the schools are relying on it. But millennial parents who are very well connected and mobile friendly, social media marketing has really changed the way that word of mouth marketing works for them. 1 in 5 millennials will turn to other people for advice. And that is very normal, right? It's human nature for us to consult to other people before we make a decision. But what's very unique about millennials is that they use social media networks to get advice twice as often as the generations older than them. So it's not just a parent asking another parent for advice, in the school pickup line or after yoga class. It's a parent asking hundreds or thousands on the internet. They're getting on their Facebook pages, they're getting in Facebook groups, and they're asking other people, what do you think? And they are really valuing that information. So purchasing decisions are directly influenced by internet research. They're crowdsourcing their decisions, and they really see that as being authentic reviews. So as an institution, reviews from outside friends and family, they weigh heavily. And the parent uses social media to seek advice twice as often as others. So it's at this point where a millennial parent will most likely be Google searching. So when I kind of think about a millennial parent, it's, hold on, let me go Google it. And I can say that I absolutely do this myself. And so this is where you're going to have other factors start really coming into play for your institution. It's going to be your website, online reviews, your social media presence. All of those things are going to start mattering at a higher level. And they're going to start comparing your institution side by side in comparison when it comes down to the final decision. Now, I decided I'm going to fall into my generational stereotype and do the millennial thing, and I'm going to Google it. So I actually decided to Google, what do millennials value? And this is straight from, I screen captured it directly, and these are the things that came about. And it just so happens to be all the things that we are literally seeing in this generational information. It's experiences, authenticity, convenience, communication, achievement. Those are all the things that we are seeing. So now that we know a little bit about our current parents, the parents that are to come, how do we start to, figuring out how we're going to communicate with them? One of the questions I get asked most often is, how do we capture their information, right? They're out there, but we don't know how to access them. Number one is make the ask earlier. A lot of reports out there will tell you that sophomores and juniors are very willing to share information at that early stage because they're excited about the idea of college. So make that ask earlier. You don't need to wait until the senior year or until the senior student applies. I would also suggest that you add to your student request for information form parent questions. Now, I do have some people come to me and they'll say, but Laura, we're supposed to have these RFI forms very short. And I agree with you. They should be very short because you want them to convert. So here's a quick tip. I would suggest that you create a two-step inquiry form. So number one is a basic short RFI form. Ask your very basic questions. The last institution I worked at, we had a two-step form. The first one basically asked all of the things that we needed for our Slate instance just to make sure they weren't added as a duplicate. And then we also added, I think, major interest or something that could help us start personalizing a little bit of information for them. And then once submitted, we had a form communication that asked them to fill out another inquiry form to give us more information. And guess what? We did that several years ago, and our conversion rate to the second form is over 80%. And what's also great is that you can talk to your counseling team and see who those students are that have completed both, because the likelihood of their interest is going to be higher because they've completed two inquiry forms. So it's also a great indicator of their interest. Also, create a parent-specific RFI form. We were a Capture client at my last institution, and we actually worked with Capture to create an RFI form that was specifically for the parent. It allowed them to put in their student information because you can't create a relationship record in Slate without the student record. So they would ask information about their student, and then they'd ask information about the parent, and they would be put into our instance. So you can start asking that right away on your website. If you are not asking parent information on campus visit and event forums, make sure you're doing it. Students, you may think that students are hesitant to give out their personal emails and phone numbers or that of their parents. But if you give them a reason or a time, of why you're going to be communicating with themselves or their parents, then they're going to be willing to provide it to you. So in a lot of our campus visit and event forums, we would say, hey, we would love for you to submit information about your parent because we want to send them confirmations about your visit, give them parking and driving directions, and we're going to send that to your parents so we don't have to bother you with it. And they're very willing to convert. The campus visit registration also allows the registrant to share parent information with a replicate block in Slate. So instead of asking multiple times for parent or guardian information, you can just click and it will replicate the block, and they can add as many people as they want to that form. And then lastly, just make a direct ask of students who don't have parent information. We started this at the inquiry stage of our seniors. We wanted to go ahead and get that parent information going because we had parent communication flows at the inquiry stage. And so we didn't want to wait until they completed their application to get that. So we identified these students. We created an automated communication that was sent to them and said, hey, we think we're a really great fit, and we want your family to know a little bit more. And we're going to send them some information about financial aid and about the upcoming FAFSA changes. And students are very willing to submit it. So all of these are great opportunities to start getting that data that you need to begin building a parent communication. The next question you may ask is, what mediums do they want it delivered? So I'm a big proponent, obviously, of data. I think you have to be data driven in this business. And so it's great to use reports and white papers. And you're going to hear me cite all kinds of them in this presentation today. But I think it's also very important to do your own research of your own populations. One of the things to remember is that you might be a very regional school. So some of these white papers and reports might be national data, and that's excellent. And a lot of them will actually look very similar to the data that you receive. But the last institution I was at, 80% of the students came from within the state. It was a small regional liberal arts school. And so we really wanted to know the people that are closest to us, that are most likely to matriculate or at least apply. We want to know what they think. And so we developed our own annual matriculated and non-matriculated student and parent surveys. So this is some results from those surveys. What kind of communication do they prefer to receive? You can see on this, parent-specific emails, texts, copy on important emails, parent portal was high up there as well. And so these are all great things to think about when you're developing your communication plan. You know, text messages are a great way to get important reminders and alerts in front of families. And a lot of people may be hesitant to text parents, but they really actually want it. And frankly, anytime that I've ever used text messages to parents to help complete an application or to get a student to complete their enrollment, it happens fast. So think of them as an outlet to help get your student to some kind of completion. They are there for that reason. How frequently do they want it delivered? You're going to see reports across the internet through all kinds of really great third-party sources that once a week to every 2 weeks is the most common. Campus ESP and RNL had a great report recently that said that they really want it once a week. We saw very similar numbers come out of our survey as well. And so we started to develop communication that kind of would hit on all of the preferences for the different types of parents that we were seeing in our system. So we know the frequency, we know a little bit about them. So now let's get into the content development phase. And the first we're going to start with is the early stages of the enrollment. So that is going to be at the very beginning of the search, because a lot of questions are often asked about what parents want to know about, but it changes depending upon where they are at in the admissions process. So we asked about the beginning, from the most to least interested. We've run, at this last institution, we ran the survey for as long as I can remember. And we would always update it based on the changes and things that we were seeing from the previous year. So the previous year to this, we had student life listed, and that was really big after the pandemic. But we started to see a couple of words come out in our feedback. And some of the words that were coming back was wanting to know about culture, wanting to know about vibe. And we thought, you know what, let's break that out from student life in our next survey and just kind of see if it ends up somewhere else. Well, and you'll see in this survey, when we added campus culture, it actually debuted at number 4 as the most important piece of content that the parent wants to know about. So that's, is my student going to fit in? And we saw this also, similar result across the students as well. Another question we asked is, what information do you want to receive? So while these two questions seem very similar, and they are, one is asking, what are you interested in hearing about? And that's in their own searches process as well. So looking on your website and things like that. This is more about, what do you want to actually receive? What do you want to get into your inbox? And so you see that there's a little bit of difference here. One of the things that we did this past cycle is we also kind of created some additional answers that we didn't have previously. And one of the things we kept hearing about was that outcomes was really important, but outcomes can be a lot of things. It can encompass a lot of pieces of your school. And so we thought, we're going to separate outcome stories, so hearing about individual students and, their success, from career development, which is the kind of practical, hands-on, tactical things that we do to make you prepared for your future job. And once we put that in, it debuted at number 3 and the most important of this content that they want to receive. This really was I was looking around, Ancora had an EduVentures, prospective student research, and prospective parent research. And they show that families are on the same page when it comes to career outcomes and choosing a college. And the top 3 outcomes that they were looking for was getting a job after graduation, getting a solid foundation for their full career, but also gaining practical career skills. And that's where we kind of see this relationship to career development showing up so high. So now that we've talked about early stages, let's get into kind of decision dynamics here. In general, students tend to see their parents as a really positive influence. So we know that, they're kind of fulfilling this emotional and part of the time, at least most of the time, some financial support. But we found that in this survey from the American Student Assistance, that just 33% of surveyed parents actually believe they have the knowledge to guide them through this process. So if they feel like they're responsible, but they don't feel well informed. And I think that that's where we really came into play. They doubt their abilities to adequately counsel their children on career planning or financial responsibilities. And more than half of the students or the surveyed parents reported concerns over having to narrow their child's college choices due to the steep cost of tuition. So our goal when it comes to this decision phase and later in with parents is your goal is to make them feel important, to feel informed and more confident in their ability to guide their student. And that is going to make them feel more grateful and more trusting when they may be not very trusting in most institutions of you. So let's talk a little bit about this final college decision. We do ask specifically a question about that. And these are some of the things that we ask. Now, next year, we're going to add a couple of additional things, or we may change them up. And you may want to talk about with your office, what are some things that we think weigh heavily in the decision for students and families to choose our institution? So for us, major offerings, cost and financial aid were far above the others, but that campus visit piece was also very high, as well as campus location. My last institution was in the downtown city environment, and so that might weigh a little bit more heavily than a rural institution. So those are some things to think about. So now let's get to the application piece. This is my favorite piece and a piece that I always want to make sure that I have in my presentations, which is this is all great information, but now what do we do? How do we apply this? And so here's a practical application for you. So let's apply a little bit about what we've learned. Number one, we need to plan a communication flow for these parents. It's something that you need to have. You can choose what stages you have it in, but I always recommend inquiry all the way through deposit if you have the ability to do so. And also don't think that you have to do it all at once. You can slowly build it out. This is not going to be something that you can just turn around very quickly. It's going to take a time and it's going to be a process. You need to develop your copywriting style and tone of voice for these parents. It's going to be different than their student and generations before them. Then what kind of slate tools for us in that instance do we need to make and implement that is going to be impactful? And what are some best practices that we can include? And then what are some unique parent-specific strategies that need to supplement this communication flow? Because it's not just about email. We have to look at the whole strategy as a whole. So number one, plan a communication flow. What I do in this situation is I use data to identify those top priorities. So I'm looking at the national data, I'm looking at the data that maybe I have run myself, and then we're determining what kind of messages that we're going to be sending based on their preferences. I focus on what are the call to actions, what kind of personalization or customization is going to be going into this. What's the method? Is it email? Is it SMS? Is it print? What of these are part of a drip campaign, or maybe they're an automation or a triggered communication? And what kind of UTM codes do I need to be appending to this so I can track it from a marketing perspective? I recommend Google Sheets. It's just a very simple way to create a timeline of communication. And it provides a really great drop-down menus and check boxes to help you with organization. And I have a good example of this coming up. So if I were in your shoes and I'm starting, let's say, an admitted parent communication flow, I just focused on 2 months, March and April, which is coming up in the spring. What are some things that we might need to talk about, right? They want to feel informed, so they feel confident in their making abilities for their students, and they want transparency. So these are some of the things that I came up with. For example, understanding your financial aid package. And if we're looking ahead to millennials, they really like videos. So maybe it's a printable PDF and a video walkthrough. And if you're really brave, maybe you're creating a price comparison sheet that you're providing to the families. so they can really break down those packages that they're getting from each of the different schools. Maybe it's an infographic on the next steps of the enrollment process that's very detailed. Maybe it's admitted student events that are coming up and you're creating parent sessions of those. Maybe it's the opportunity to video chat. They're trying to make their decision, but they really want to talk to you or someone in your financial aid office. And of course, advice on creative ways to pay for college. What are those other things besides what the institution is giving me that I can do to make my students, desire to attend your school a reality? So this is what I use. And this is a kind of a general template that I created for today for you. And if you stick around to the end of the presentation, I'll give you a QR code and you can have this for free. So this is what I use to kind of start building my communication flows every year. There's a review status in there as well. So you can also use this as a review sheet to know where are you at in the process of getting these emails launched and this text messaging launched. So this is what I use. I think it's very accessible for our counseling teams as well. Most people are really well versed in Google, and it just seems very accessible across the board. Copywriting and tone of voice is something to really consider, being straight to the point and avoiding that jargon and admissions lingo, using conversational language, being very concise, not bearing your favorable data points, but also not hiding data points that are, maybe not as favorable, because obviously we know the more honesty you can provide to these parents, the more they're going to appreciate it. And then showcasing accountability with direct contact to people who can help you. So if they want transparency, then be transparent, right? Give them the names, the contact information, because they're going to really appreciate that. An email that I've written in the past about public safety, this is a small excerpt from that. And you can see how we've used this different type of copywriting and tone of voice to be very straightforward and transparent. Now, we know we don't always want parents to see our daily crime log or our annual crime stats, right? But you know what? You deserve full transparency when it comes to your student safety. And that's the stance that we're going to take as an institution. And so we're going to be very transparent about that. Now let's get into Slate tools and best practices. If you are a Slate institution, this is going to be a great little section here for you. One of the most important things is that you are developing your communication flow with configurable joins on the relation base. This really provides you the opportunity to send emails directly to the parents and the guardians of the students directly. Then that way you're able to use their actual name, their first name. It's not dear proud parent of Sally. You can actually have their name. A quick little thing to mention here is that if you don't have a parent first name, you can still make this happen and create a subquery export in a formula where you can coalesce the first name and the proud parent of the preferred name. So then that can pull in, if the parent's first name does not exist, it can pull in proud parent of Sally. So then you have the options that it will automatically fill in which one ever is available to you. You can also create parent message groups. This is really important because you do not want your parent to accidentally opt out their student. And what's great is that Slate has given us the ability now to create custom unsubscribe forms. So you can put them into a prospective senior parent or admitted parent message group, and then you can create that custom unsubscribe form and ask information about why they're unsubscribing to gain more insight into how you can improve your communication. And if you do want to carbon copy a parent, then we do recommend selecting no unsubscribe for these transactional mailings, because you do not want them to opt out their student on accident. Another just quick little tidbit is add your UTM tracking codes to each email. It does provide it in the edit section, and this will help you track clicks and the performance of these communications. And then building out content blocks and translation codes for personal communication is also going to be important. So this is an example of an email. It does not look like much of an email to most people who see this, and it's because we have so many content blocks as part of it. The image changes, the content changes, and the staff assigned all change according to the personalization of their student. And so that parent has the ability to see specific information about their student, but it's written for the parent. Another thing to consider implementing is a gated parent portal. This is an opportunity that you have to display student-specific information. So you could show the status of their student, checklist items that might be unavailable, or checklist items that are not completed yet, and maybe even links to their admissions offer or their aid offers if that's something that you have in your Slate instance. Now, if you don't have this, you do not have to worry, because there's a great opportunity for you, which is Campus ESP, who is also a partner of Capture. And they're a great option for institutions who don't have this in-house portal capability, but that you want to provide some kind of place for parents to engage and receive information across the student life cycle. So I highly recommend that you look into Campus ESP if that's something that might work for you in your institution. And then lastly, of course, do not forget your engage links if you are a Capture client, because that's going to help you identify those students when they are perusing your website. Now, I did mention that there's another piece to this puzzle, which is it's not just email and text. You want to be able to build a full strategy around parents. And so you need to think a little bit broader as to what are those things that are going to support the communication that I'm driving. I'm using the example of millennials because they're the group that's coming up. So social proof, right? We know that reviews and testimonials and online word of mouth are really critical to these parents. And so maybe you need to start gathering quotes from graduates, but maybe also people who employ your graduates, right? That's almost like a third party that they're hearing from rather than someone that seems internal to them. So go out and find those people who are hiring your graduates. Maybe it's parents of current students or parents of alumni whose child has been through this experience with your institution. But the most important thing is still be brief. And if you're doing this on your website, be page specific. So if you are on a biology page, make sure it's someone who is hiring a biology graduate or a parent of someone who is in the biology program. The next thing is going to be optimizing your website, right? This is a Google generation. And so you need to make sure that SEO is completely up to speed so they can enter your website regardless of where they're coming from, because you cannot think of your homepage as the entry point to your website anymore. You want to make sure that you have engaging content and opportunities to convert as many places as possible. The third thing is to strengthen your social and video presence, right? So that's going to be something we know that millennials really appreciate video. They're going to go to videos to learn how to do things. My husband installed our dishwasher by watching a Googling it and then finding a YouTube video. It's the most millennial thing I think you could do. So you need to consider kind of strengthening that social net video presence. Another thing I want to throw out there is to consider user-generated content. It's called UGC. And in our institution, that would mean our students, right? Going to our students, identifying maybe those who might be deemed influencers on our campus and seeing how they can contribute to the conversation. That'll bring a little bit more authenticity, and parents would be more willing to hear from someone who's actually living the experience. And if you aren't engaging in any of these ways, then you really should start, because obviously these parents are coming. Now, there's a ton of other ideas and opportunities when it comes to millennials: video chats, live Q&As, virtual events, current parent to prospective parent communication, that would be of interest. Maybe it's parent-specific events or sessions on your campus or during your admitted student days. And maybe it's building your own parent ambassador team. Maybe that's what it's going to take to really make sure that they feel comfortable. Now, one thing I do not want to pass by here is the importance of maintaining this attention to parents throughout the student life cycle. And this is where your partners on campus are going to come into play. You cannot do this on your own. And when a parent is experiencing this great communication at the offset, at the very beginning of this process, they are going to continue to expect that treatment as they continue to be a parent. So you need to make sure that you're kind of breaking down those silos on your campus and having these conversations with other offices across campus who are going to be working with your current parents to making sure they continue to feel informed, because it's not just now, but it's retention later. All right, so let's talk about a little outcomes. This is a quick case study from my last institution where we did implement a lot of these strategies. We had a series of 10 parent campaign emails that were sent to prospective students prospective senior parents this past year. In 2018, senior parent opens rates were about 30%, and this year they're at 46.4%. And then we did the same with the admitted parents, and they have creeped up from about 52% up to 60%. So we're continuing to see that these efforts and continually paying attention to the messages that we're sending are continuing to increase our open rates and our click rates. The most important piece to me, though, is asking them themselves, what did you think? And in this year's survey to parents, we were so excited to see these outcomes. 97% of parents, both matriculated and non-matriculated student parents, said that the content was timely. 94% said the content was helpful, and 79% said the content was of higher quality compared to other institutions that they were being recruited from. And so this was a huge win for us because we were able to see how are we doing, right? This is a good way to gauge that. We also allow them to have open-ended comments. We don't specifically ask about communication. We just say, hey, what are some things that you feel like we're doing right? What are some things that you feel like we need to correct? And we had some great comments specifically about the communication that we were sending to them, whether it was extremely helpful. They loved the direct email communication. They felt that we were invested in looking out for their student, and it helped us navigate the process. And that was essentially the point of developing this from the get-go, is to make sure that they feel informed and they feel confident in the decision that their student and their family is going to be making. So now it's time to, assess your results. This is something we do at the end of every year. What emails are performing poorly, what are the, low open rates and click-through rates, and what could be attributed to that? Is it maybe the subject line, the content, the timing? Maybe we need to do some A/B testing on a couple of these. And are there any questions that we need to add to the parent survey this next year of things that maybe we're recognizing or realizing we might need to change? So it's a great opportunity then to also update your survey to see what is possible in the future. Now, I know I went through that very quickly, but I do want to thank you for tuning in today. And I also want to thank so many of the great companies out there who provide really great research. And these are just a handful of them. They're all over the web. They're doing great white papers. They're doing great research. I highly recommend that you go to all of those. And I want to open up the floor to questions. I also want to provide you with a QR code for that free communication flow template. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to you about parent communication.